My 4-shaker meal shake system for traveling. Now I have 5 different shakers. 2 of them are the ones I keep in my daily driver rucksack. Then I will also, so first of all, the structure of the video. First of all, let's talk about these 2. Then I will talk about these 5 shakers. Then I will talk about what is actually in these 5 shakes. And then I will also talk about other containers I also have in my travel bags. So first of all, these 2. Now, traveling provides a filter, and this filter is that it cannot weigh very much, and it also cannot be that big. So volume as well as weight are the main constraints. So in terms of nutrition, this is quite a constraint because often food contains lots of water. Therefore, the form factor that seems to be the most convenient in terms of basically getting something down into a small size but also a low weight is removing most of the water. In terms of now time efficiency, instead of chewing the food, if one just drinks the food, this seems to be the most time efficient option to get nutrients in. Therefore, what is in there is actually food powder, but not only food powder but also protein powder. So different kinds of nutritional powder, one could say. Sometimes it contains more protein, sometimes it contains more carbs. Now in this case, these are the 2 shakers I keep in my daily driver rucksack, which I already mentioned. On the outside of my rucksack I have 2 now water pockets, not water pockets, but bottle pockets, and these I can use for having the shakers in, but also having them accessible on the outside. So the first one is actually water, but it is water added with salt, or salt is also added to the water, mostly electrolytes, not mostly, but more specifically electrolytes, not only salt. And the second one now is actually this one, and this one contains now whey protein, but not whey protein, but whey protein isolate, as I found that the lower fat as well as the lower sugar content allows me to basically cover my protein needs on a broader need. So if my body has a protein need, I can cover it. Whereas if I then have additionally milk sugars in there as well as fat in there, then my body might be more likely to reject the protein. So I'm still hungry, but I cannot really eat as much whey protein as I would like to. But with whey isolate, I can isolate the protein, therefore the name isolate, and therefore I seem to also be able to drink it or eat it, however one wants to name this, on a basically broader range. Now the first shaker now is, first of all, the shaker itself. I do have a couple of different shakers. This one I decided on to be the meal shake shaker. This one is made by company Huel. I do have a couple of different ones, for example also from the company I mostly order the food powder from, which is company Bulk. Now I call it food powder because it is not only protein. It is not only protein powder, and these different protein powders, and also sometimes food powders, contain different macronutrients but also micronutrients. Of course, it to a certain extent makes sense to simplify now a powder into its main, or categorize it by its main macronutrient. But since there are also others in there, and since the goal is not to have protein shakes, but my goal is to have meal shakes in a travel ready form, I call them for now at least food powders. So first of all, let's take a look at this shaker, and I will also discuss why the shaker is good and also why it is bad. Second of all, I will then discuss the 5 bottles, and then I will discuss what is actually in these in total. And also I will go through basically the process a little bit of how I arrived at these conclusions. So first of all, let's take a look at the water bottle. The water bottle now consists out of this shaker, which is made by company Huel, which I previously already tried, but it seemed to be the case that it didn't work for the long term, mostly I think because it is one nutritional profile, and in order to allow my body to basically so I supply my body basically with the supply for need that is somehow messaged from the body to me. So my body says, I would like to eat this. And then I'm like, okay, I have these options, and let's try to have a compromise in between. And so the less options I have, the less the body can basically decide. And so if there is a specific macro or micronutrient in a specific food, then my body has not a very good option if I just have one food available. Very simplified. Of course, I would also eat other things as well, but if I just would have Huel maybe twice a day or something like this, I found that this did not work, especially also since my nutritional need, let's just take a look at the macronutrients, seems to also vary throughout the week, as for example on more cardiovascular heavy days, my body seems to require or demand also more carbohydrates, whereas also on resistance training days, my body seems to require more protein. So therefore, in order to serve these needs, I already need to have at least two different meal shakes. But what about all of the micronutrients then? And what about maybe some fats and so on and so forth? So it gets quite complicated really quick, which is the reason I now have kind of a buffet of options. And I try to, again, get the options down into these 5 shakers because I cannot carry all the buffet in my kitchen with me when I'm traveling. So let's first of all take a look at the shaker. The shaker has a lid. The lid is made out of basically plastic, and then we also have this rubbery latch on this lid. We also then have the top. The top now is more plasticky compared to this. I think this is made out of Titan, not Titan but Triton, whereas this one is made out of something else. Now there is also this grid in here which serves in terms of the shaking quite the shaking is quite good with the shaker, I would say. So if you add food powder in here, and the maximum I found I can add safely in there, that is then still kind of shakeable, is 2 scoops as from Company Bulk. Now, the scoops from Company Fuel are bigger, but these now from Company Bulk are the ones I use on a basically daily basis. These have 70 milliliters in terms of whey protein. This would be about 30 grams. Sometimes it's 25 grams. Sometimes it's a little bit more in terms of the grams because the density of the food powder varies. So if I have 2.5 scoops of basically any of the different food powders, I then can have it basically in the shaker, and I still am able to shake it then properly and also drink it properly without this being too stocky or sticky. Now, on the bottom here, I already have electrolytes. I cannot show them because it is filled that much, but what I have usually in there is 2 capsules of electrolytes. Why 2 capsules of electrolytes? Because I could also salt this, but it is quite, I didn't find a very good way to carry salt in my rucksack. Now, carrying salt as a salt tablet seems to therefore make the most sense, but what if I, instead of not having just a potassium chloride, not potassium but sodium chloride, I could also have magnesium and the other electrolytes as well. So in here we have magnesium, sodium, calcium chloride and potassium. Now, therefore, what I usually do is I keep this shaker, and if I drink out of the shaker most of my water, then I will add 2 of these additionally to the 2 I basically ingest in the morning. I found that if I don't ingest 2 electrolyte capsules additionally to my multivitamin and mineral in the morning with basically the current food nutritional profile I have on an average, or the average food nutritional profile seems to result in me getting otherwise cramps. So therefore I added first 1, then actually first a half, then basically 1 full, and then eventually 2 in the morning, and ever since then I didn't have any cramps any longer. Basically only up until I maxed the dosage. So the dosage recommendation is 2 tablets, and I take this on top of the multivitamin and mineral. But then if I am traveling, I basically take additional electrolyte tablets. I also take additional electrolyte tablets whenever I sweat a lot. So this could be in the sauna. After maybe a 30-minute sauna session, I would then maybe have 1 or 2 of these tablets. And this seems to also then decrease how much vegetables my body otherwise would require. So after the sauna in the summer, for example, but also in winter, I found that I would eat a whole bowl of salad or maybe 2 bowls of salad, and my suspicion is that this would be due to basically micronutrients, in this case electrolyte demand by the body. So then this shaker can be closed, and now already quite a feature of the shaker is now, and this is why I am using now these food shakers. And this is also why basically other containers are not as travel friendly as one would like them to be. Now, if I open this up, this can be quite a mess. Also, if I'm in a hostel, or if I'm in a hotel, or I'm in a gym bathroom, or on a gym sink, basically, then how do I get this out here? And then I might spill something. Already, I have my keyboard here. I don't want to even get the scoop out. So what I can do instead is the following. Because now this is... I can screw this off. Because I can screw this off, I can now screw the top of another one off. And if I now have powder in here, I will not add any powder now because I already have eaten. I will just pull this the other way around, and now I can basically do it like this and add as much powder as I want. Now, I had a different system before where I had a distinct shaker that was just for water or liquid, and the other one would also be liquid, so this one would only be water, and the second one would be the food shaker. And the food shaker, so the distinction made sense, or it does make sense. The problem is just that you then need to have additional food in there. Now the problem with having a already made food shake is there are two main problems, I think. The first one is that it gets bad after a day in summer. The second one is that you then already have something for basically a nutritional demand in the future, which might change. So I often found myself that if I already made a shake of fuel, or I already made a shake of vegan protein powder from bulk, that I then found myself in the future not wanting this, but instead wanting something else. This could be whey protein isolate, this could be chicken, this could be something else. So if I now already have made a shake, then I also need to make sure that I basically, to a certain extent at least, can predict what my body needs in the future, and that my body actually then wants this in the future, and that it doesn't taste disgusting at this point in the future then. Now, therefore, I have now these shakers. Now, these shakers also have disadvantages. The main disadvantage is that this here does not get more waterproof over time, but less waterproof over time. In the beginning, I washed them out with hot water. As I washed them out with hot water repeatedly, what I assume is that this here began to deform, and this now led to multiple of these shakers which I had purchased. In total, I think I had purchased 7, 8 or 9 of these shakers. I did not have all of them purchased because some of them I got basically replaced because, well, they were within the warranty to a certain extent, which in Europe is 2 years, and after 1 year usually there is a reversal process of who has to prove whether this shaker was already damaged in the beginning or something like this. But the company has been quite gracefully, not gracefully, they supplied me basically with maybe 1 or 2 or 3 additional shakers, and I already threw, I think, 3 or 4 of them away because I could not use them any longer. And I did not know in the beginning whether it was the top or the bottom, and I tried them all, and I made an experiment which took like 2 hours of basically having all the different combinations, which if you have a couple of shakers takes quite a little bit of time, and to then find the permutation that basically is the resulting leaking shaker. Now, what I realized is that unless I get rid of all of them, I would never really find out. It seemed to also be the case that some of these bottoms would also been deformed, so I basically threw 3 or 4 shakers away. I still now have one where the top is leaking, but since I now have filled it with, in this case, oats, it's not that big of a problem because there is no liquid in it. But if I would have liquid in it, and if I'm traveling and I need an additional water bottle and this is already out and I would want to use this, then again this would kind of spill if I shake it. And this then is quite a mess, because if you shake it at home, if you shake it in the office, then shaking this and then just having it drop out of there, liquid drops out of there, is not that useful. So first of all, now I have 1 water bottle, mostly because I only have 2 slots in my rucksack. If I only have 2 slots in my rucksack and I need at least 1 water bottle, then I can only carry 1 additional powder. What is the 1 additional powder? In terms of nutrition now, it seems to be the case that the average nutrition that is supplied by society these days is quite carb heavy, but not so protein heavy as I would prefer, or my body would prefer. Therefore, the thing I need to supply the most is protein. And the best protein source that my body seems to want also the most, and that seems to again cover, so the whey isolate seems to be the protein source that my body accepts the most in different situations. Vegan protein, for example, my body also sometimes accepts, but sometimes it tastes disgusting. The reason for this is probably because there is, in addition to the protein, also other things the body at this point in time might not need, such as different plant things, or maybe also fiber, and maybe also other things. And also, the protein bioavailability of whey, I think, is in the 90s, whereas the protein bioavailability of, let's say, pea protein, I think, is 70 or 80 or something like this. The protein bioavailability, meaning how much of, let's say, 100 grams the body can synthesize into its own protein tissue, or into its own amino acids, into its, let's just say, its own protein. So if there is 100 grams of protein, in terms of the whey isolate, for example, then the body can utilize 90% of it. So 90 grams out of the 100 grams of whey I would eat are basically synthesized as maybe muscle, but maybe also as some other things that exist out of protein. So therefore now, whey isolate seems to be the thing I want to have in my rucksack. I before had just normal whey protein. The problem with normal whey protein is that the macros are slightly different. So it contains 7 grams of fat, but also it contains more sugar. So about twice the milk sugar is in there. So now I will go through what I have in these additional shakers, and these additional shakers are now what I keep with my... so I do have a second rucksack if I'm traveling. If I basically take additional things with me, then I carry a second rucksack, usually in the front. So I have one rucksack in the back and one in the front, which I then put on the luggage thing in the train, for example. So now I can carry 2 additional bottles on the outside and maybe 1 additional or more bottles on the inside. Now previously I had 2 additional bottles on the outside, 1 water bottle and 1 other bottle, and then 2 additional basically containers on the inside. These are now past creatine capsule containers, which are now filled with some of these ingredients, which I now will shortly talk about. So first of all, this is now whey protein isolate, and the second one, and I also keep a scoop in there, and the second one is now vegan protein, but I also added soup spice. This is the soup spice I have is without sugar. What is usual? So sugar is usually in these soup spices, and so I found one without. It's made by company Seitenbacher, and I order it from Amazon. So now I will go through basically the different meal source components, meal shake components I have in these additional shakers. Now, I do in total have 5 different components now. Actually, yeah, well, it's 5 different components now, but I only have 5 shakers. So what component is not in the shakers? The component that is not in the shakers is the beef protein. So let's first of all go through basically all of the things I have and then what is in the shakers. So the first one is bulk vegan protein. Now, the bulk vegan protein, I ordered them in these 2.5 kilogram bags, and these are the macronutrients. Now, if we take a look at the ingredients, we have vegan protein blend, pea protein isolate, soya protein isolate, pumpkin seed protein, quinoa flour, flaxseed powder. Now, out of the first 4 ingredients, 3 are identical to Huel. So, out of the 4 ingredients of Huel, basically 3 overlap also with this one, which makes this one kind of a cheaper alternative to actually Huel that is also higher in protein and lower in carbs and lower in fat. Therefore, after initially having bought Huel, I think in total I bought 4 packs of Huel, and also I again tried this Huel experiment this year again, but it again kind of failed because it was too expensive. If I also can get this, and this has also similar ingredients, and I also can add carbs, so carbs seem to be fairly cheap. Protein seems to be the most expensive macronutrient, and then fat, it depends on what you want. If you want omega-3 fatty acids from fish oil, then they're also quite expensive, but if it's sunflower oil or olive oil, then it might be a little bit cheaper. So now, in terms of basically the finances of food, it seems to be the case that protein is the thing you pay the most for. So now, in terms of price, this bag I sometimes get for maybe 45 euros, sometimes I get it for 37 euros, sometimes for 38, sometimes for 39. Now, in terms of the macronutrients now, we have per 100 gram, 3.3 grams of fat. We also have 362 kilocalories. Then we have fiber, 3.7 grams, whereas the whey protein and the whey protein isolate have 0 grams of fiber. We also have 77 grams of protein, so 77% of this protein powder is actually just protein. Then we also have salt, 1.9 grams, and we also have digestive enzymes. I did not read the entire ingredients list. The rest would be digestive enzyme complex, amylase, protease, cellulase, lactase, lipase, thickener, xanthan gum. Xanthan gum is also found in Huel, I think. And Huel also has also has a digestive thing in there, which is called Bacillus coagulans or something like this. Now, the other powders are now beef protein isolates. I was vegetarian for 6.5 years, but then I eventually came to realize that it's not very practical to be vegetarian, especially if one has a higher protein demand compared to somebody who doesn't lift weights. So therefore I searched also basically, I applied the filter, what if it needs to be a milkshake and how can I get this into a milkshake form, because I want to reduce the time cost of eating, because I have many things to do, I want to do many things now and in the future, and so therefore can this fit through this? What I also have to mention is that this is a part of my nutrition, but it's not all of my nutrition, and sometimes I eat all day long, no shake, and sometimes I eat a shake before, or I drink a shake before a normal meal, and so on and so forth. So I switch in between these many things, and sometimes I might have exaggerated this portion, maybe, I don't know. So, beef protein isolate now contains 97 grams of protein per 100 gram. And we also have 1.65 grams of salt in there. We also have 0 grams of fiber, carbohydrates, 0 grams of fat, 1.5 grams. And the energy is 402 kilocalories per 100 grams. So these are the macronutrients as you find them on here. And mostly it's made out of beef. these are now the first two protein powders. Then the third protein powder is normal whey protein. Normal whey protein is now a little bit more expensive compared to this one, but it's way cheaper compared to the beef protein isolate. So the beef protein isolate sells in between 60 to 80 euros. Sometimes it's even more expensive, but I don't buy it if it's that expensive. Per 2.5 kilograms again. Now you could also calculate the kilogram price, and this probably would be more useful, but since I have these 2.5 kilogram bags because they seem to be the most useful for storing them, and also if you buy these things in bigger bags, they are usually cheaper. There is also a 5 kilogram option, but not for all of these different powders, so I decided to just not randomly, but I decided to have this form factor, and I also now have many different bags, and I also use them to make my own milkshakes, and I put them again into these bags, so I need a constant supply of these bags, because eventually they degrade. Pure whey protein is now what I keep in this shaker, hence it is yellow, because unlike whey protein isolate, which is kind of white, this has a more yellowish tone to it. So this is what it looks like. But I could also eventually show what the other powders also look like. Now, in here we find basically, so there are two different processes for basically extracting the protein out of milk. The first one seems to be filtration, and the second one is something a little bit else, which then results in the isolate. I read it up on Wikipedia, but it seems to be the case that I mostly forgot. Ingredients. What do we have in here? Whey protein concentrate, milk, sunflower lecithin. So these are now the macronutrients, if you want to screenshot them, and now I will read them to you. So first of all, we have energy, 387 kilocalories per 100 gram. We also then have fat, 7 grams. We also have 4 grams of carbs. We also have fiber, 0 gram. We also have protein, 77 grams, and salt, 0.38 grams. Now, this is quite a little bit of fat. 7 grams of fat is quite something if I consume it again and again, and especially since it also has 4 grams of milk sugar. It seems to be the case that this sensation I have after eating foods which which seem to correlate with either, so it could be, there could be a couple of explanations for the sensation I have. The sensation I have is that subcutaneously, where basically the subcutaneous fat layer would lie, in all of the different parts of my body. So this could be on my stomach, this could be on my triceps, for example, this could also sometimes be in my face. I do have a sensation after eating food that probably also correlate to a higher blood sugar, which I also measured a couple of times with a blood glucose monitor or meter, and it seems to correlate basically with blood sugar. But I also have the same sensation, or a kind of reverse sensation, when I actually would be in a phase, so fasting for 16 hours or fasting for 3 days, and then I have this sensation and it never goes away, basically in the reverse way. And it's again this tickling sensation in where a subcutaneous fat layer would be, and where it also would, where the body basically would be either building fat or drawing fat from. So therefore, it's now, basically I have now years of experiential data on this. And it seems to be the case for me at least, or I kind of decided for me at least, that this probably is an indication of either insulin, but then it would also have to be glucagon on the other end, the molecule that is basically in the bloodstream whenever there is fat basically taken from the fat cells again. And with insulin being the built-up molecule and glucagon then on the other side being the molecule that then depletes basically fat, but as well I think also glycogen from the liver. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that if I have pure whey protein, that by my bio indicator, which is the sensation, that this here seems to build up fat if I ingest too much of it. Whereas the whey protein isolate, I do not have this problem as much. And because this now scales up and down, I could rate this on a scale from 1 to 10, for example. If I eat lots and lots of junk food, let's say 8,000 calories of chocolate, then I have basically tickling sensations all over my body. Now, I also recently asked, or have been able to ask Copilot about this, because there have been years without Copilot before this, and I never found any evidence that other people also had this sensation. But it seems to be the case that this is now also found in other people, at least according to Copilot, which is the ChatGPT layer on top of. Now, Copilot basically is Microsoft's version of ChatGPT, one could maybe simplified say. So, if I have too much of this, it begins to taste too sweet to me, and it also builds up fat, apparently at least as approximated by the sensation. So therefore, I needed something else. And then something else was, in the past, vegan protein powder. The something else was beef protein powder. But it seems to be the case that my body does not want as much beef protein powder as I would need to eat in order to supply enough protein to satisfy hunger. Now, I think I'm also able at this point in time to distinct or differ protein hunger from hunger for carbs and so on and so forth. So if I'm really hungry and I cannot sleep because I'm so hungry and it feels very dreadful, then it's usually protein. If I have kind of a craving and I want to eat carbs, but it's not really hunger, it's just, okay, I could eat, but I really need to eat, but it's not like this physical hunger sensation with, that's the best I can describe it. And so this seems to be more the carb side. Now, a benefit of this here is that it also satisfies to a certain extent the sweet craving, especially since I have been trying to avoid sugars for now a couple of years. I have been off sugars, but I still had honey and fructose in my diet. I just try to avoid foods with added sugar, as this also seems to be a good proxy for basically food selection. So what I'm currently using this for is whenever I want to have something that's a little bit sweeter, sometimes I try to reduce the sweetness by adding cocoa, so just normal cocoa powder without added sugar to it, because the sugar is already in the lactase. Now, I also had a problem with my liver in the last couple of months now, or 1.5 years, and I think that my liver also, that's kind of the leading hypothesis, my liver also had a hard time digesting this much, or basically getting rid of this much lactase. I heard once on a podcast that there seems to be an upper limit of how much lactase and also fructose or lactose, and not lactase, lactose and fructose the body can digest within not the body can digest, but the liver can kind of use or utilize or whatever it does with it within 24 hours. And this seems to be maybe around 30 grams or something like this, if I remember correctly, or the limit I remember now was for fructose. What I'm trying to say is that my liver apparently had a hard time after this, and I had the sensation of very hot hands and very hot feet and increased body temperature after this, which I now also in the last couple of years have been able to approximate by basically the skin temperature sensor on the Garmin Fenix 7S Pro, but also with measuring my basal temperature, but not so much with this symptom. That was a lot of talking. Let's now switch to the next one. This is now pure whey isolate. This is now way more expensive compared to the pure whey protein. So whereas this one sells for maybe sometimes 38, sometimes 42 euros, sometimes 45 euros, and if it's not discounted, it still sells for 66 euros or something like this, either on Amazon or on the bulk website. But the bulk website, if it's without discounts, it has like ridiculous prices. So this year now, I got recently, so I bought 4 bags of these for 55 euros on the Black Friday sale on the bulk website, but otherwise it would sell for, at least currently, it's again discounted at 80%, it says. What is 80%? 80% discount. And additionally, I have usually a student discount applied, but now this cost me 55 euros a bag, but usually it sells for maybe 80 euros or 77 euros or something like this. The price differences or the variance or the variability rather of the prices are just ridiculous, and this is kind of a major issue with getting these things from this company. Now, the pure whey isolate has now way more keto-friendly, or let's just say protein-high-friendly micronutrients. So, in terms of energy now, for 100 grams we have 361 kilocalories. Then we have fat 0.5 grams. 0.5 grams compared to 7 grams, that's a lot. Now, compared to the 7 grams of the pure whey protein. Then we have carbs 2 grams, that's basically half of it, and also half of it sugars. So basically 2 grams and 2 grams of it sugars, and I assume that's mostly the mixed sugars. Not only I have assumed, but I also again asked Copilot with multiple different questions, and it said basically mostly it's mixed sugar. Then we also have fiber 0 grams, and we also have protein 87 grams. Now there is also a version, maybe this might be relevant for somebody who maybe wants to reduce lactose even further, and there is also a 90 version of it, which then instead of 87 grams per 100 gram of powder would contain 90 grams. So basically 90% of it would be protein. And then there is also salt. There is also salt in it, 0.5 grams. I found now that I can eat this. I can eat this almost whenever because it almost tastes like nothing. It has a very slight taste to milk. Not slight, a similar taste to milk, maybe a little bit, but maybe also like curd. I can't exactly say. What I can say is that this has been very useful. So what I now am able to do is combine this here with a source of carbs, which seems to be kind of the only source of carbs, at least, that also bulk sells on their website, which is oats. Now oats in this case sell for around 6 euro and 50 per 2.5 kilograms. So maybe I will again sample the prices through for somebody who's looking just for the prices. This around 6 euros per 2.5 kilograms. This year I bought for 55, but it also could be selling at 70 to 80 euros per 2.5 kilogram. Pure whey protein now sells for maybe 40 to maybe also 60 euros per 2.5 kilogram. The beef protein isolate is the most expensive out of all of these. It's as expensive as the isolate 90, and this now also has 97 grams of protein in it. So basically, this is the most protein powder I have out of all the protein powders, and this now sells for anywhere from maybe 65 to 90 euros. Sometimes it might even sell for 110 euros or something like this for 2.5 kilograms. In total, at this point in time, I've had this now for multiple months, and I only had, I think in total, 2 or 3 bags of this. I still have 1 full bag standing somewhere, and this is, I think, only the second bag. So what I currently am doing is I'm mixing this often with the vegan protein powder, and then I have maybe 2 scoops of this and a half scoop of this. I also have one meal shake, which is basically half of this, plus soup spice, and sometimes I have like 2 of these, and then another half scoop with these 2 combined, which sometimes seems to then satisfy my meat craving, which sometimes I have. And so this has been also, I basically, the question I often ask myself is, what is the one meal shake I can eat or drink for the infinity of time? And the answer is always nothing. I always think for a certain period of time that it's the combination of this and this and this, and maybe egg powder additionally to this. But then I realize, okay, the demand of my body changes, and then I basically go for something else, and I go for something else, and I go for something else, which then is also probably the main reason why something like eating just one meal shake from one company doesn't really work. Now let's discuss what I actually put in these. So the first 2 bottles are now the water bottle I have, which is then also my meal shake bottle whenever I travel. So what I then would do if I travel, I would keep additional water, so usually 4 additional bottles of water, which look like this. So this is a bag I recently got, and now I have these bottles. Now these are years old, and I could buy them new at the supermarket, and these are also very soft plastic. And this is not very good in terms of avoiding microplastics, but I didn't find a better solution yet. So this is kind of a big bummer in my microplastics optimization thing. Now I have 4 of these bottles, and these 4 are quite small. So this is basically 2 liters. Each bottle is 0.5 liters, also quite easy to calculate. Now, in one of these shakers fits about 1.5 bottles, so one of these shakers seems to have about 700 milliliters of volume in it, or maybe it's 800 milliliters. So what I now can do is I cannot distinguish between eating and drinking out of this, but because I need to make the meal shakes on demand anyway, this again, of course, is a constraint. I cannot have all these different shakers with me all the time, and sometimes I just need a meal shake. So sometimes I actually make a meal shake before. For example, I recently visited my parents, and we went into the woods, and so there I actually just ate before. I then also had at least a couple of, I think I had 3 shakers in total in my pocket, and then I basically just drank water, because we also ate afterwards together. So now, so I was not just in the woods, we were woodworking. That's what I was trying to say. So now, I have this shaker. I cannot have 2 shakers if I'm traveling. It would be nice to have more water in the outside of the shakers, or in the outside of my rucksack, but currently I did not really find an option where, I mean, how many shakers of these can I buy? One of these shakers costs 12 euros. I don't know what other shakers cost, but I purchased this again and again, and you also have to pay shipping cost if you don't have another pure product, which you then order. I think the threshold is maybe 30 euros, 50 euros, or something like this. The second shaker now is whey isolate, and then we go through the other shakers. The colors are not really matching, so now I have red, which would be the best color for the beef protein, but since I only have 5 shakers in total and 1 is leaking, I decided to, in here, have the vegan protein. So I now have the vegan protein in here, and I do not only have the vegan protein in here, but this is vegan protein with soup spice. And for 1 kilogram of vegan protein, I add 2 tablespoons of this soup spice, which looks like this. It contains different things, also different vegetables, so this could also be in part a kind of vegetable replacement. What about vegetables though? If I have, let's say 1 or 2 meals of a day in shake form, the problem is that apart from basically having all of these different powders, I do not have any vegetables in there. But this ideal I wanted to approximate is being able to just drink out of, basically drink my nutrition, maybe also for a day, maybe also for 5 days, without major negative consequences. Ideally, this would even further my health. So, this is now not really about this here, but the solution I landed on is bulk greens. So it is a vegetable powder that contains 8 different vegetables. This could be spirulina and chlorella and a couple of other ones. Kale, I think, is also in there. And I could also get different vegetable powders like paprika, like broccoli, and I also have a couple of them. But then I would have to again optimize basically how all of these get together, and then I would also have to mix them together on with a certain frequency. And the same is true for also the meal shakes. And therefore I decided, at least for now, to basically just put the pure powder in these shakes. And I do have these electrolyte tablets, which means the salt is not really that much of a constraint. And if I go without vegetables for a couple of days and just have vegan protein powder, which also one could argue is pumpkin seed or pumpkin protein, is it maybe a little bit like a vegetable? And flaxseed, maybe also a little bit like a vegetable, but not really a vegetable, but at least it's a plant. It also depends on the definition of vegetables. So now, what I decided is in these 3 additional shakers to have vegan protein powder with soup spice. Currently I'm still having the soup spice, and it also seems to be the case that once a day or every second day I do need the soup spice. There seems to be something in there, maybe it's some additional micronutrients that I otherwise do not get. I want something that is spicy, that is umami, which is, I think, the word for the taste buds. But the taste buds also, there has been a model in the past where the tongue was divided into different sections which would taste different things, but I think that's no longer true. What I wanted to say is that spicy or umami is something my body every now and then seems to require, and if I just have whey protein isolate and also vegan protein powder without additional spice, then this seems to kind of resolve this issue of basically a spicy craving. So therefore now I have vegan protein powder in one, and I do have oats in here. Now the oats also serve the purpose of having a carb lever. Because these other things are now protein, I also at least want one shaker to have kind of carbs. What if I need to go for a swimming training and I cannot just rely on the protein powder? I tried for quite some time to be very low in carbs. The result seems to be that in terms of cardiovascular output, it is just less. It is maybe reduced to something like 60%, maybe sometimes if I slept very well and I have just the right circadian phase of the day, I maybe can get to 80% of what I would be able to achieve with carbs. But what if I just eat carbs? Now, with great power comes also great responsibility, and so therefore having carbs in my diet needs to be managed quite properly. And it seems to be the case that the oats provide especially the whole grain oats, not so much the powder, and also the flakes that are kind of broken down. So the whole grain flakes seem to be the thing that spikes my blood sugar sensation, subcutaneous tickling sensation, the least. And so that's what I'm kind of optimizing for at this point in time, because it seems to be like a blood glucose meter that is actually built in, which I find quite ridiculous, but also quite interesting and also quite useful. And now after a couple of years, it seems to be the case that it relates basically to fat buildup and fat breakdown, and so why not just use it as an indicator? I then have also whey protein, normal whey protein, mostly because it's cheaper, and also sometimes I have cravings for sweet things, mostly for sugar, and I therefore also have an option with this, and I don't need to go and buy 16 bars of chocolate. Then I also have the vegan protein powder, then I also have the oats, then in these two I have the whey protein isolate, and I do have the main shaker, which is now the food shaker, as well as my water shaker. What about if I need to carry more food with me? I found that I also, compliant with my otherwise black policy, that I could take these old creatine capsule containers, and they still have the glue on them, which I even with alcohol couldn't get really off. If I have these, I can basically have them, and there fits lots of it in there compared to less of it in the shaker. But the main downside now is that I cannot use this shaker into shaker system, which I might now again explain. I don't know. I recorded the video. This is the 5th attempt, because currently, or not currently, but previously, I failed at some point in time with the recording mostly, and so I don't know if I recorded this already. So if this is the shaker, then what I can do is, if I now have whey protein and I just did a resistance training workout, I can just get it the other way around and then get the protein in, and then I shake it. And because now this is now also the water shaker, basically for the next couple of hours, maybe for the next 3 days, depending on what I'm actually doing, I drink the water out of this. And so what I can do is now get water in there, shake it again, then add electrolytes again. If I'm running out of electrolytes or my body seems to run out of electrolytes, then I just add the electrolyte capsules. And also because of the grid in there, the electrolyte capsules, because they are so big, as I might also already have mentioned, they don't go through the grid, which now prevents the electrolytes basically from going up, which means now I can add tap water to this, which is not salted or electrolyted, but the water that comes out of this is electrolyted. It's kind of like a magic bottle that that doesn't turn water into wine, but tap water into electrolyted water. So this has been an overview. This has been an overview of my nutritional meal experimentation, meal shake system, which I have now developed for at least the last 2 years. But before this already I began experimenting with nutrition, such as eating pasta before a strength workout, which also probably increased my performance, and maybe then having curd after, and so on and so forth, which has been going on since maybe the age of 11 or 12 or 13 or 14. I don't want to over-exaggerate here. Over-exaggerate is also an over-exaggeration. So these 2 containers I keep in I currently at least keep in my second rucksack, which is identical to the first one I already showed you. And then I also have a travel bag. In this travel bag I keep creatine powder containers, which contain 1 kilogram each. And I also keep, I think at this point in time, whey isolate and the vegan protein powder with soup spice in it, because this seems to be what is most useful. What I also have to mention, maybe as a final note, the average nutrition supplies already quite a little bit of carbohydrates. So if I am running out of nutrition, I probably can get a bun somewhere, or a bread, or pasta, or something like this. And this also is fairly cheap. But what I then lack is usually the protein. And also if I'm, let's say, somewhere and I'm eating, then if I eat protein before, there seems to be some evidence, at least, that if I have something that is protein, maybe also something that is savory, so something with spices that tastes kind of like umami, that this then also dampens the impact of the carbs as a metabolic cost. And so if I have, let's just say, I'm having dinner with at my parents' place, let's just say, then what I did in the last week, as I visited them and we did the woodwork and so on, I just had a protein shake before dinner, also to not eat all of the food that was on the dinner table.